wanted to walk you through using your library card at the Midwest Genealogy Center. Great databases that you can improve and expand your genealogy, as I have over the last many years. Examples will be pulled from my book, Born a Slave, detailing the biography of my great-great-grandfather, Arthur Jackson. First, I wanted to show just how many possible ancestors you've got to uncover. If you're a 50-year-old person, you were born this year, around 1970. I've got another slide following for those of you who are closer to 70 years old, so never fret. But this just basically shows that all of us have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, etc., taking us back in time through the years. So if you were born in 1970, your parents would have been born about 20 years before that in 1950. Your grandparents, of course, would have been 20 years before that in 1930, and then going back in time. So what I hope this shows at a general glance is that if you're 50 years old this year and you're African American, you have the potential of rediscovering some 64 last generation 4th great-grandparents who were alive and born around 1850 and emancipated about 15 years later in 1865. Again, this is just a generalization. I encourage you to create your own chart so you can see for yourself just how far back in time you go each generation. And also, if you have grandparents way back in time who married one another and were cousins, that's going to throw this number off just a little bit as well. So again, this is just generally speaking. If you're 70 years old or thereabouts this year, you were born around 1950. So that means your parents were born about 90 years ago in 1930, and your 3rd great-grandparents, 32 of them, which lived on this planet 170 years ago, taking you back to 1850. So again, I hope that that will encourage you to see just how many people you can rediscover and pursue onto a lineage chart. Lineage chart is what we've encouraged all our members and friends to fill in as much as they can and submit to Magic so that we can, at a glance, see your direct ancestors. This is a 5-generation chart that I created back in 1980, starting with myself. And over the last 40 years, I have filled it in with my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents, all of which, almost all, were Caucasian people, with the exception I found of course, with Arthur Jackson, who was my one and only last generation African-American slave ancestor. Fill in your chart and don't worry about blanks, because those are opportunities for what? For growth and knowledge. It's also a great way to show someone else who's going to help you to see at a glance what you know, and more importantly, what you don't know. Because if there are gaps in any one of these birth, marriage, and death dates that this generalized chart shows, it's going to help them discover more easily how to help you. The other document that I've encouraged people to also create for each of these direct ancestors is a timeline of their life. This was Arthur Jackson's timeline as I constructed it in 1980 when I was 11 years old and started genealogy. I encourage you to do one of these charts for each of these people on this chart, because it's going to help you discover again, year to year, as many years as you want to plug into it, where the ancestor lived, what they were doing, and most importantly, what you are missing in terms of records. So I plugged in what I knew, added some of the census years that I knew existed but did not know or have. And you can see here at a glance, if there were an 1890 census to be had, some of you know that it burned and only fragments are available. But if I was going to find him in the census, where would I look? What state, what city, what town, what county even? Well, I know that he was living in 1887 in Donovan County, Kansas. That's White Cloud, Kansas. I found a newspaper entry for him. And I know from the 1895 Kansas state census that he was living in White Cloud. So in between 1887 to 1895, where am I going to search? You got it, White Cloud, Kansas. Similarly, in 1930, and I'm going to walk you through this later on, where am I supposed to look for him in 1930? In White Cloud, Kansas? Look a little closer. One of his children filed a draft registration for World War I in 1917 and said that his father, Arthur Jackson, was living in Kansas City, Missouri. And I know that Arthur died in 1931 in Kansas City. So between 1917 and 1931, I'm going to look in the 1930 census for where? Kansas City. Please, please, please create a timeline for each of your ancestors. It will help immensely. The first database I want to show you is Find a Grave. It's not really technically any that you need to use your library card for, but it's a great way to get started, and it's a lot of fun. Just go to findagrave.com, and this is the search engine, search screen, with all kinds of little tidbits that you can click and fill in if you want or know. As most of you know, working with databases, you have to play around with them a while, go back and forth and try different things, especially with the spelling of names. Fortunately, you can type a name, first and last name, and even select partial last names or similar name spellings down here. So play with this until you find what you're looking for. If you don't find what you're looking for, we'll talk about that in a minute. I typed in my dad's name, Reginald Wayne Jackson, and I know that he died in Kansas City, so I included that as well. And the lower part of the screen is the result. There's only one Reginald Wayne Jackson buried in Kansas City, Missouri, and that's my dad, Sergeant Reginald Wayne Jackson. I clicked on his name there, and you'll see his memorial. This is one that I actually created and built, so they don't all look as nice as this. I included a photograph of him. Anyone can upload about 5 or 6, maybe 7 photographs. And a photograph is also technically could be a document, so I uploaded his obituary as well. His vital statistics here are at the top, and at the bottom I've actually linked generations to this. You can add and link parents, spouses, siblings, and children down here in this area of the screen. So if I were to click on my grandmother's link right here, I could in fact take the Rogers back to the 1700s, just going tombstone to tombstone, grandmother to grandfather to grandmother to grandmother to grandfather. Similarly, I could do that with my Jacksons, which I will show you here by clicking on my grandfather's link. Here's his memorial. Again, his picture, vitals, his obituary, which I typed in to this part of the field, his wife, my grandmother, and his parents. Again, if I were to click on the Cliffords, I could take them back years and years and years too. That's just how much I've worked with Find a Grave to link these generations and these people together. But I'm going to click on Roy's father, and here's Jabez Jackson's memorial page. I haven't uploaded a picture yet, and I kind of squeezed it so it fits on one screen. Again, his statistics, some biographical information, and all of his relatives, from parents, his spouse, his child, my grandfather, and then his siblings. These are the other children of Arthur and Ida Jackson. And you can see Arthur and Ida right here. So if I were to click on Arthur, here is his page. There's a picture of them together, the only one I have of Arthur. And again, his vital statistics, biographical, and connections to others. These are Arthur's children. These are the first generation kids out of slavery for my Jackson family. I also included here a link to Arthur's slaveholding family, Richard and Lucinda Jackson. And their memorial number is right here. If I took that number, copied it, and then pasted it into that original search screen right here in the memorial ID screen, then it would come up with Lucinda Jackson's memorial page. All of the, she and all of her family, what Arthur might have called his white family, are buried in Elmwood Cemetery in Kansas City. I don't have a photograph of her, but I did find a drawing of her from the Kansas City Star that I inserted here. Then you've got her statistics. She was a daughter of the American Revolution. That meant that her ancestor was in the Revolution, and it actually was her father. She was an actual, what the DAR calls a real daughter, one of that first generation children out of the Revolution. And so if I were to click on James D. Atlee here at the bottom, it would take you to his page. He was the Revolutionary soldier. You can also search on cemeteries by clicking on this cemetery link right here at that original search screen. If you've been to a cemetery, say as a child, but you didn't know a name, or if you just wanted to see who else was in a particular cemetery, click on that cemetery tab and search on and browse through the entire cemetery. I clicked on cemetery tab and typed in Highland in Jackson County, Missouri, and came up with this search result of Highland Cemetery, showing on Find a Grave there are 7,029 memorials. That's tombstones that have been viewed, transcribed, and then entered by a loving volunteer or many volunteers into this Find a Grave portal. So if I were to click on Highland Cemetery here, it would give a little description of the location of the cemetery. Some of them are more detailed than others. I'd like to see someone enter something right here for the description of the cemetery. Sometimes it will list famous people buried there, but then here's your search screen so that you can see and view some of those thousands of memorials, the 7,000 that are added. Always take advantage of frequently asked questions and tip screens. This is some tips on how to access Find a Grave's search screens a little bit better and more adroitly. So take advantage of some of those filters and wildcard icons. But what if you don't find your ancestor on Find a Grave when you do a search? That means that your ancestor may never have got a tombstone to begin with. So no tombstone, there's nothing, for a volunteer to go out into the world and transcribe and then enter into or take a photograph of and post on Find a Grave. Or your ancestor might have had a tombstone, say in the 1850s, but a lot of years have passed since then, and something might have happened to it. Whether it fell over and is now buried by grass and leaves over the last 150 years, or maybe vandalism took its toll. Otherwise, if there is a stone in the cemetery that has survived, maybe it's just that a volunteer hasn't gone out yet and transcribed the information to enter it. So again, Find a Grave is entirely built on volunteers like you and me going out in the world and either entering our own or others as a service project. You can create a free account on findagrave.com, and then you can add your own memorials. Remember that this is a memorial service that's supposed to identify tombstones, people who are actually buried in a cemetery or burying ground. So you need to have some kind of evidence or strong belief that your ancestor is in a specific cemetery before you can go about adding a memorial. Otherwise, you can enter your genealogy into another free database called Family Search. Family Search is very much like Ancestry.com, although I am so much more a fan of Family Search than Ancestry, which is a monthly membership based commercial proprietary system. So my bullet points here kind of make the case for FamilySearch.org. Take it or leave it. I feel it's the perfect place to document your ancestors and actually enter and document your research. In my humble opinion, it's better than Ancestry because above all else, Family Search is one tree. That means there is one page per human being who has ever lived on this planet. Whereas Ancestry is thousands, maybe millions of trees, one tree for every member who has paid for a monthly membership. And so you've got lots of trees out there on Ancestry.com, and it can become overwhelming and kind of not efficient. So you create a free account at familysearch.org. It is entirely free. And then you can have access to all the databases and documents galore on Family Search. You can enter your genealogy, your data, as you find it, and access that account anywhere in the world that you log in. So that means you don't have to tote around notebooks and folders and bags and suitcases of research wherever you go. You've got it all in your account if you've entered it into their pages. And so all you need to do is have an internet connection where you can log into your account and access your genealogy anywhere. You can also print forms, either blank charts or completely filled in ones. As you enter data for an ancestor, a husband, a wife, and their kids, you click on print the family group chart, and it actually prints it out. It's just as if you would have typed it. It is beautiful. It also shows sources and citations, which I believe and firmly believe in. You can upload and you can link, or you can show photographs, snapshots of different documents that support the data that you're entering. So it's a really great way to include and add photos of people and of documents. It's a wonderful way to collaborate and share with others, because you are actually working on the same tree, that one tree that others are also working on. If I happen to be a long lost cousin of yours and I go into and find our common fourth great grandparent on Family Search, but I notice that somebody has entered his incorrect death date because I happen to have his death certificate, and I have his tombstone photograph. I have his probate record. I have all kinds of information about when he died, and that date online is wrong. I go in and change it. So it's editable, and that means if you're very much interested in what other people are editing to your common ancestors, all you do is click a link, and once a month, Family Search will send you an email to show you links to all those changes that have been made to your ancestors' file, and then you can accept or deny them. So I just really love Family Search and encourage you to investigate this. There's absolutely no need to even buy a separate genealogy program, because you can use Family Search for free. Here is Arthur Jackson's Family Search page. This top part of the screen shows his vital statistics: when he was born, when he died, where he's buried. Over here on the right, you can see all the links to research avenues. You can see what has changed in his record over time, and click on and accept or change back sometimes if you have to. And then here's where you can watch or unwatch activity on your ancestors page. If I scroll a little bit more on this page, you'll see some of the documents that I've entered for Arthur, primarily the 1910, 20, and 30 census returns, just to show some of those citations. And then if I continue to scroll, this is his family. His first marriage to Melissa Anderson. They were only married for 4 years when she died in 1888. And then a few months later in 1888 is when Arthur married Melissa's sister, Ida. And then Arthur and Ida had these children, including my great-grandfather, Jabez Jackson. Each of these, of course, is a clickable link to their own page. So if I were to click on Jabez's link here, it would take you to his page to show you his one page where all of his statistics are recorded by myself and by anyone else out in the world who might have information and want to share about him. Let's use your library card. Go to mymcpl.org. Then click on the Midwest Genealogy tab at the very top, and scroll to Browse Databases. And then this is the main search screen that you'll come up with. Right away at the very top, African American Biographical Database. Sounds pretty enticing, doesn't it? I was enticed, and I clicked on it only to find that it primarily only identifies famous African Americans. Arthur Jackson, my ancestor, was not famous by any means, and he is and probably never will be on this database. But give it a shot if you want. America's Genealogy Bank is the first one I'm going to show you. After you click on America's Genealogy Bank, it takes you to a login screen where all you need to do is enter your library card number. And then here's the main search screen where if I were to enter the last, first, and maybe middle initial of someone I'm seeking, it would search all of these 5 databases at once, which I will tell you from experience is overwhelming. So I suggest that you click on each one of these individually, depending on what you're wanting to find out. I primarily only use these 2 right here, America's Obituaries from 1977 to today, although I have found that mostly the newspapers that are in here are mostly from the last 20 years, so 2000 upward. Still very helpful. The Social Security Death Index from 1937 to 2014, also very helpful in lieu of being able to access death certificates in other states, which you might not even have access to if you're not related to someone. It can also sometimes give clues to someone's death, and I'm going to walk you through these 2 today. So here's America's Obituaries. I typed in my father's name, Jackson Reginald, and I, of course, knew that he died in 2012, so I thought I would limit the search from the many, many Reginald Jacksons out there in the world who have obituaries on here to those who died in 2012. And there were 34 results you can see. This screen shows 1 through 10, and my dad's was number 7. So down here at the very bottom of what you can see here, I clicked on his name, and then it came up with his obituary. It's kind of funky the way it's formatted here. So what I did was copy, to scroll through this, right-click, hit copy, and then pasted it into a Word program where I could format the text and make it look pretty before I printed it out. Always include a citation. Don't ever forget to include exactly where you get your pieces of information. Going back to this main search screen, I thought I'd walk you through the Social Security Death Index. I typed in my great-grandfather's name. This is my grandfather's dad. Jabez Jackson is what his name was, but I found through lots of trial and error that he used many, many names throughout his life, including Jarvis, mostly. Sometimes, as you'll see later, he used the name Davis. So I started here with that and knew that he died in Missouri. And when I did a search, it came up with that it didn't find anything. So I thought I'd remove his first name since it could have been anything. I thought I'll see how many Jacksons there are in this database, all Jacksons who have died in Missouri. That's going to be extensive. There are 5,005 identified in this indexing. So I sorted the search by the oldest items. You see over here on the right where you can drop down and select either newest items or oldest items, or I think the other one is best result given what you've plugged in. And so the oldest death date that they have for any Jackson dying in Missouri is 1963. So it certainly does not go back to 1937, does it? It doesn't even go back to 1950 something when Jabez Jackson, my great-grandfather, died either. So he's just not in this database at this time for whatever reason. So I thought I'd show you his sister, Hazel. Hazel was another child of Arthur and Ida Jackson. She married a man named Mr. Levine. I knew that she died between 1982 and 85. I wasn't quite sure without looking it up when, but I did know she died in Raytown, Missouri, because I had been to her apartment as a kid. So I typed in what I knew, and the result was one result, which came back and shows definitely Hazel Levine, who died in 1985 in Missouri. So if I clicked on that link right here, it would take you to a little page that shows whatever the Social Security Death Index has extracted and provided, including her birth date and the month that she passed away. And of course, confirmation that she did indeed die in Raytown. In lieu of a death certificate, this might be very helpful to lead me to other sources of information. Back to our main search screen, America's Obituaries and Death Notices. Now, we've just searched America's obituaries and death notices within America's genealogy bank. Do you remember that? So this is basically, this one is basically in here. However, if you're just looking for obituaries, which I'm often doing, this is the link that I would use. And so I'm going to click on it. It has a little bit different link or different view, but it is the same database. So if I click on that, it actually has a pretty little map where you can select a particular state that you're looking for. Or if you don't, you're going to search all the states at once, which is good to start with. So up here, plug in what you know. Name, if you know a date, even if it's just a year or a span of years. And then if you think that there's maybe someone's name or some particular word that might be in their obituary, that's sometimes helpful too, especially after, on a second or third try when you come up with thousands of results by just typing a name. I typed in my grandpa's name, Roy Jackson. I knew that he died in 2016. I knew that he died in Blue Springs, and that probably was in his in his obituary. And so the bottom of the screen shows the result. Yes, indeed. One result with the information I plugged in, and there it is. If I were to click on that, Roy Weldon Jackson, that would come up with his obituary, just like you saw with my dad's. Back to the search screen. At the very bottom here, you can see Ancestry, and I'm going to click on it. You all know my thoughts and feelings about Ancestry. I'm not knocking it entirely, especially after you see what we're going to find on Ancestry. And the reason I'm pointing it out today is that Ancestry is available to you to use at home through June 30th, 2020. They've extended their license agreement with the library so that you can use it at home. It was mainly for the closure quarantine period that we've recently had. And so they've extended their rights for people to use Ancestry at home for free using their library card through June 30th. So take advantage of that. After June 30th, you can still access Ancestry for free, but you have to be in one of the Mid-Continent libraries to use it. You have to be within their library using their systems. This is the main search screen where most people will use to search census, but they've got thousands of other databases that you can access. I'm going to focus on just one here for only just a moment to highlight one of our own, and that is the School Directories and Church Histories. If I click on that link right there, it comes up with a very simple search screen, and then I'm going to narrow it. I'm not really interested in church histories at the moment, so or city directories. So I'm going to go to the school lists and yearbooks. So this is a yearbook search. Did you ever get a yearbook when you graduated? Has yours gotten destroyed over time? More than likely, your yearbook is online right here. If you click on yearbooks, type in a name. I typed in Preston Washington, just to see if our fair leader might be mentioned in a Kansas City high school yearbook. Sure enough, it came up with 888 results. Who knows what I'm going to find with this Preston Washington? Who knows if it's our guy or not? I don't know. But the first 3 results look like just text. And I did not click on those. Rather, I scrolled down a little bit more to the next section of the screen, and something looks a little familiar. Got a good-looking guy right here. 3 nice portraits, and then it looks like he might be involved in a couple of group pictures here that look pretty much like sports to me. These are taken from the 1962 yearbook, 1961 yearbook, 61, 60, 62. So right here on one screen, I've got access to 3 different yearbooks. And if I were to click on one of these, which I'm going to do right here, I'll click on this one. Oh my gosh, our Preston Washington is on the Southeast High School basketball team, the Knights, in the 1960 yearbook. I wonder which one he is. I took the picture and dropped it into the free program called Paint, which is on every computer, to click a button or two and lighten the photograph a little bit. You see the difference between the original photograph I downloaded and one that I fixed a little bit. Just lighten their faces a little bit so you can see them better. A great way to access yearbooks. So I'll give props to Ancestry for that, huh? The next database I want to show you is Fold3. This is great for military records. I thought I'd walk you through looking for some military records that are available in Fold3. I typed in the name Reginald Jackson. So Reginald Jackson was my dad's name, and he was named after his Uncle Reg, Reginald Jackson, who was another child of Arthur Jackson. Uncle Reg, was in World War II. So you can see here I've dropped down to search through World War II records. Here are the results, and if I were to click on his record, it would show his details printed out here in nice, easy to read text. Shows his birth date, his death date, his enlistment date, and his release date. So great information that might lead me to more information about Uncle Reg. I went back to the search screen and thought I would try looking through draft registration cards specifically. There's all kinds of detail or radials over here that you can select or deselect to help narrow your search for certain things. And so I am going to look for his registration card, which I found right here, Reginald Brewster Jackson. And if I clicked on that, here is the actual scan of his card. All kinds of really great information here that show where he was living at the time, when and where he was born, who he wanted to be contacted in case something might have happened to him while he was serving, his signature. If I go to the second page or back side of the card, it shows that he was 5'9" and a half and 168 pounds. God love him. He probably had a 30-inch waist, maybe a 26-inch waist. And this was filled out in October of 1940, which I thought was interesting, that he actually registered for the Selective Service even before Pearl Harbor happened. So here's a picture that I've got of Uncle Reg in his military uniform. He was a son of Arthur Jackson. I thought I'd try to find my great-grandfather, Jabez Jackson, in Fold3. He would have been old enough to serve in World War I, and through a lot of trial and effort, because he used so many different first name variations, I finally figured out that he was using the name Davis for this particular record, and his World War I draft registration is under the name Davis Roy Jackson. He's the father of my grandfather, Roy Jackson. Born in Donovan County, Kansas, that's White Cloud, a grading contractor working for someone named A. Jackson. We know who that is, Arthur Jackson, who was then living at 319 East 47th Street. And this is right along those apartment buildings on the south side of 47th, just east of the plaza, before you come to the Nelson Gallery. So this is, again, in about 1917 when this was filled out. Really great, too, to have his signature, my great-grandfather's signature. So that's Fold3 in a nutshell. The next one is Kansas City Star that I'd like to point out to you. There are lots of historical newspaper databases. It's not all just in one, unfortunately. You can see here that there's historical newspapers, there's Irish newspaper archives, newspapers.com, 19th century newspapers, the Times digital archives, which is basically New York and London. I mean, it's just because these companies have bought the rights from different publishers that they are all in different separate databases, most of which individually would cost us, but because the library has agreements and subscriptions that they have paid in order to make these available to us for free, that we've got them here. And my favorite is the Kansas City Star, of course, because I use it almost every day in the research I do for the books I am working on. You can search the Kansas City Star from 1880, when it first started, all the way through to today. If you have a name that you're looking for, or an event, or something that's happened, and it was published in the Kansas City Star, you can find it. It is amazing. And I just want to pause here for a second to think and encourage any of you who might have connections with the Kansas City Call. Wouldn't it be fantastic to have the Kansas City Call right here and be able to search it by keyword, by any name that's buried within that 100-year plus publication. So if any of you have connections to the Call, I know that Ms. Stewart recently passed. I don't know who's assumed responsibility, but it would require, of course, legal and written permission from the publisher in order for, say, the Mid-Continent Library, the Midwest Genealogy Center, to actually digitize the Kansas City Call and make it available keyword searchable. Please, if anybody's watching, I encourage you to connect the Midwest Genealogy Center director with the publisher of the Call, and maybe we'll see it here one day. It would be a great research tool for African Americans in Kansas City. So if I click on Kansas City Star, again, you can see that it's available, and the Times as well. You know, the Star and the Times were separate for many years. You're going to be searching both of those newspapers from 1880 through to today. Of course, the Times ended a few years ago. I typed in Arthur Jackson, and 423 results came up, as you can see here at the top. Way too many to navigate through. So I went over here to narrow my search, and I typed in 1931 because I knew that Arthur died in 1931. So how many Arthur Jacksons are named in the Kansas City Star in 1931? There are 4 entries. You can see them right here, 1 through 4. And I found that only 2 of them relate to my Arthur Jackson, these bottom 2, and they actually happen to be his death notice and his funeral notice. So here's an extract of one of them. I also just threw in his tombstone at Floral Hills here too. So lots of details, sometimes more than others in obituaries. And one thing I focused on for today was his address. I thought the 414 Boone was interesting because my grandpa told me that he used to live with Arthur and Ida, his grandparents, at 414 Boone. So we had discovered over the years that Boone Avenue had changed its name. The city changed its name to 42nd Terrace. And so I typed in the address 414 42nd Terrace into Google Maps, was able to find that area. What you're looking at here is an aerial of today's 42nd Terrace, which is formerly Boone, and the arrow is pointing to where Arthur's home used to be. You can see right here to the right, this is the rooftop of the Embassy Suites Hotel at Broadway and 43rd Street. And just across the street from the Embassy Suites is the big St. Luke's campus. And as most of you know, that has been built upon and is slowly encroaching and taking over the historic African-American neighborhood called Steptoe. This was the Steptoe neighborhood right here. And a few homes still surviving in Steptoe. You can click on a button in Google Maps from the air, from this aerial view, and go down to street level. And so this is a view of 42nd Terrace, looking towards the Embassy Suites with the St. Luke's Hospital off to the right. And right here where the arrow is exactly where Arthur's home was in 1931. Those elm trees are still there today from back then. Another database online that you can access even without your library card is Missouri Death Certificates. Just type in your Google screen, Missouri Death Certificates, and the link will come up where you can search for any Missourian, any person who's died in Missouri from 1910 through the mid to late 1960s. The certificate has to be 50 years or older before the state archives will release it. So take 2020 minus 50, and you'll come up with the end date of when these certificates are available. I'm not a mathematician, you know. But here is Arthur Jackson's death certificate. He was living at 414 Boone when he died in 1931. My grandpa told me that he actually saw the moment when his grandfather passed away. He was looking out the window of the kitchen where his grandpa was sitting on the front porch, and he saw his grandfather's head rest gently on the post of the porch. And moments later, when Grandma went out to check on Grandpa, he had actually passed away in that moment. Thought that was very interesting, and kind of a very interesting connection to a death certificate, especially that Arthur actually died at, what is it, 7:45 in the morning. And Grandpa did say he was getting ready for school that morning. Unfortunately, Ida Jackson, his surviving spouse, my great-great-grandmother, did not list Arthur's parents' names or birthplaces here in this section. All I can say is bless her heart, because they were married 50-some years, and I know full well she knew who they were, who their names were. A roadblock once again. Back to the timeline for Arthur. I thought I would walk you through how to fill in a couple blanks in your timeline that I know you're going to construct for each of your ancestors. Let's try to find Arthur in 1880. He was in 1887 in White Cloud, Kansas. So I thought, let's try White Cloud, Kansas 7 years before that and see if we could find him. We're going to use the Heritage Quest online database, which again you can use for free at home on the leisure of your couch or desktop. By clicking on Heritage Quest, here's the main screen, where you can search United States Census from 1790 to 1940. This is the 1880 census link. All kinds of places where you can plug in information. I typed in Arthur Jackson. If I knew that his name was spelled Arthur all the time, I could have clicked on exact, but I've learned that that's not always the case, and you probably have as well, that especially with surnames are spelled differently by different people, by different generations. Maybe a census taker scribbled and the person who transcribed it had a hard time deciphering it, and they might have misspelled the name for this searchable database. So it's not a very good idea sometimes to click on exact. However, if you do click on exact, it has a drop down that will show up, and you can click on the Soundex, so any name that sounds like Jackson would show up in the results. So again, these are avenues for lots of trial and error. Also keep in mind that some former slaves did not always know how old they were or where they were born, so this sometimes could take some trial and error. I made a list of all the ages that Arthur told the census taker from 1880 to 1930 when he died, and no two ages match up to another. It's all over the map. So sometimes people didn't know exactly when they were born, or maybe they were trying to conceal it for whatever reason. The same philosophy holds for location as well. I thought that he lived or might live in White Cloud, Kansas. So if I clicked on exact to this place, I came up with false results. There was no match. So I came back to this screen and thought, well, I'll try surrounding areas. So if you click on exact to this place, it drops down and you can select any one of these other options. So I chose, let's search for Arthur in Kansas, the state, or any adjacent state to Kansas, which would include Missouri, of course. And when I got my result, there are 404 results, as you can see here at the top. And after much trial and error, I did discover and find that this one here at the bottom of your screen is actually him, Arthur Jackson in Bigelow, Holt County, Missouri, which really is just one county over from where White Cloud is, except the Missouri River divides Donovan County, Kansas from Holt County, Missouri. So one river and one state line divides those two counties, and this is exactly where Arthur was in 1880. So if I click on View Record right here at the very bottom of the screen, hopefully you can see my cursor moving, it comes up with a typescript of that line item from the census showing Arthur Jackson, a 21-year-old black male, single from Virginia, who's working as a farm laborer. I wanted to know more, so I clicked on the actual record itself. And there's Arthur, 21. Living with, oh wait, what is this? He's living with a family named Jackson too, but all of those people are white and he's black. come to find out, this is the key document that linked Arthur Jackson with his former slaveholding family, including his slaveholder right here, Lucinda Jackson, 15 years after emancipation. He continued to live with or very near his white Jackson family. When he got married, for those of you who haven't heard his story in a previous presentation, Arthur married Ida Anderson, and their children were named after, 3 or 4 of them named after children in this white Jackson family. I didn't know it at the time that I found this record that right next door was Arthur's sister. She was married to a man named Thomas Sharp. And I didn't know that until I searched one of those databases of newspapers when she died in 1903, that her obituary listed her brother, Arthur Jackson, living in White Cloud, Kansas. So it was a fantastic connection, and it's something that you should also remember when you're looking through census, is that you need to look on either side, sometimes page or two before and a page or two after, to see if there are remote connections to your actual ancestors. Sometimes you'll find parents or brothers and sisters, as I did, living nearby, or sometimes living in the next household. Thomas and Mary Sharp, by the way, if you look at them, they and their family are all African American. They're all Black. And so I'm learning more these days, much more now, about Mary and her children too. So that's another avenue of research. Back to Arthur's timeline in 1980, I'm going to walk you through the 1930 census, and it's going to use the Heritage Quest database again. Clicking on 1930, and here it is, the search screen, Arthur Jackson. And I knew that he lived in Kansas City, so I selected exact to this place. I also selected exact to the name Jackson. Not a lot of times is Jackson misinterpreted. And he's the very top search result at the very top of the screen here. Arthur and Ida, sitting in a tree. Clicking on the view record, there's the typescript of all the data that's available on that one line entry. Arthur is living with Arthur and his wife are living with their children, and Roy Jackson, a grandson. That's my grandfather. So I clicked on the record. It's a little hard to read here, so it's extracted and enlarged below here. But you can see that Arthur and his family are living here, and 2 doors down is J.B. Jackson. That's Jabez Jackson, his other son. So Jabez had remarried to Florence, and they were living 2 doors away, while Jabez's son, Roy, was living with his grandparents up above. So here's Roy. Arthur and Ida are paying $12.50 in rent in 1930. I thought that was interesting, that they were all listed as being white. It shows their birthplace, the birthplace of their father, the birthplace of their mother, supposedly. This is all wrong right here. Arthur was born in Virginia, and his parents were both born more than likely in Virginia. And then here's J.B. Jackson, Jabez Jackson as well. Lots of clues and information in census returns. Don't walk through them too quickly. Try to discern all those context clues that you possibly can. And that is an overview of just the beginnings of what you can do with your library card at the Midwest Genealogy Center. I'd like to thank you for your time, for all of your encouragement, enthusiasm, and I and other MAGIC members are here to help you. Thank you very much.